Good morning, everyone. Rev here. I'm back. It is March the 7th, and I'm glad to be back. Karen and I had a great time on our vacation. I appreciate all the prayers and all the well wishes and happy anniversary wishes that you all sent. I appreciated them. We appreciated them very, very much. So thank you. I'm glad to be back and be back at it. Uh, I'm going to read to you this morning from John chapter 2. This is the first 11 verses. This is Jesus' first miracle. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Dear woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My time has not yet come." And his mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby, stood 6 stone water jars. Well, I ain't just not back into it yet, am I? Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." And so they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside. "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." This is the first of his miraculous signs that Jesus performed in Cana in Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. As I said, this is Jesus' first miracle, and he does it in Cana in Galilee. He's at a wedding. Now, let me first tell you this morning what this story is not. This is not a story that gives permission to drink alcohol, as some would suggest. I can't sit here this morning, and won't sit here this morning and tell you that alcohol in moderate and reasonable amounts is sin. There are arguments that some alcohol has medicinal purposes. Now, obviously, that's an abused argument, but it's a decision that you have to make yourself. Now, alcohol can be a deadly and destructive force in today's world, as anybody who has lived with an alcoholic or has faced that addiction themselves can tell you. But you can't make that decision based on this story. It simply has nothing to do with it. This story is a revelation of who Jesus is. Now you got to remember who's writing the story here. John. And this is the same John who wrote the book of Revelation. So let's take a look at what's going on here. There's a wedding going on, and wedding celebrations lasted for days in biblical times. And for a Jewish wedding feast, wine was essential. In fact, the rabbis used to say, without wine, there is no joy. So to run out of wine was one of the greatest humiliations for a family. But Mary comes to Jesus and she says that they've run out of wine. Now, what does Mary have to do with all this? Well, we're not sure, but apparently she had something to do with the wedding arrangements. And she had enough authority here to tell the servants what to do. And many say that Jesus becomes indignant to Mary. Dear woman, why do you involve me? He knew that Jesus' argument, for lack of a better term, was that he wasn't his time. But what he says to Mary was actually a very common conversational phrase. It was spoken gently. And as I said, my version, the NIV version, says, "Dear woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus' reply to Mary, it's not one of reproach, but it indicates here a misunderstanding of the situation. What Jesus is saying here is, don't worry, you don't quite understand what's going on here. Leave things to me, and I'll settle them in my own way. And that's why Mary could turn to the servants and say, do whatever he tells you. She knew what Jesus meant. And Jesus tells them to get the 6 stone jars, fill them with water, and of course the water becomes wine. In Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20, Paul tells us that God is able to do immeasurably more than we can think or ask or imagine, or however you want to say that. The Greeks have stories that they tell to involve their own mythical gods. One story tells of a festival that was called the Thaia, where the very revered god Dionysius came to visit. The place where they hold the festival is about a mile from the city, where 3 empty kettles were taken into this building and deposited by the priest there in the presence of the citizens and of strangers who may have been staying there. And on the doors of the building, the priest would put their seals on it so that anyone else could do so as well, but the priest would put their seals on it. And the next day they come and they examine the seals, and then they entered the little building there to find the kettles full of wine. There it is. John is saying to the Greeks here, you have your stories, but you know they're not true. Jesus has come to do what you have always dreamed your gods could do. So look at what happens here. The bridegroom's needs are met. Jesus reveals his glory. His disciples put their faith in him. This is not something Jesus did once in Palestine. He continues to pour out his grace every day, even today. And whenever Jesus comes into a person's life today, there comes this new quality that's like turning water into wine. John is saying to us this morning, if you want abundant joy, you become a follower of Christ, and there will come a change in your life, which will be like turning water into wine. I'm Pastor Mark. I love you guys. Be safe, be well, be blessed, be strong. Go do something for Jesus, and I'll see you tomorrow.